This time on the Eldritch Lorecast,
Dungeons and Dragons Beyond, get down for dinner.
my brain's back online. People.
Yeah.
Woo!
Call me wizards.
Mario time, boing.
Forgotten Realms, here we come. So just say something big and bold, Ben.
Pick up wherever the hell you want to pick up, Ben.
Yeah.
Our good Christian bricks will never touch the foul, besmirched face.
Sorry, I'm trying. Somebody asked in the
He's
chat.
so distracted.
Thank you.
I miss playing in person, Ben.
Chat, how do you feel about sellout?
What do you think of sellouts, and could we pay you to change your mind?
Owlbear slinging shade at our technical issues in the chat.
This is like a 5-inch in its girth. Like, this is incredible.
I like girth. Girth is a good word.
But I do
Yeah.
reserve the right
To
to.
be perfectly honest,
Am I the only one here who watches Lego Masters?
yeah.
At the time.
You couldn't handle the girth.
Yeah, I couldn't handle the girth.
All that and more right now.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the #1 podcast in all the planes. I was going to make a joke about the PAX Australia coming back just for the Eldritch Lorecast, but I made that joke on the panel. So if we ever put that episode live, I'm just going to look like I'm repeating myself. But this podcast does repeat itself because it's here every week. Every week, this podcast repeats with new news, new discussions. We're talking about ads, and now I'm selling it a little too hard. My name's Ben Byrne, and I am here, as always, joined by Shawn Merwin, James Hake, and Dael Kingsmill in studio.
In the flesh.
In the flesh.
Oy.
Not for all of you, just for me.
Yeah, still
because
digital there.
Yeah.
Still, yeah.
You're all reading her expressions digitally. Dael, I've got to ask you, because I am curious about this. If you're setting up for a game, you're the game master. What does your setup look like? Do you have a DMG? Where are your dice? Do you have miniatures behind the screen? Do you use a laptop or tablet or a notebook? What's the setup?
All right. So my setup, this is okay. Now I have to think about this. So I'm a standy DM and I'm not a snacky DM. I can't eat anything while I'm doing DMing.
Sure.
So the snack table is a separate table. I've talked about this before. It has done wonders for my game to put the food on a separate table. People have to bring a plate over so that it's not, mucking around with whatever's going on there. So I've got my DM screen. I'm big on rolling behind the screen because I love to lie. I have my I have a folder, a binder that has a ton of information in it. So just copies of the character sheets, things like that.
Gotcha.
Notes for the session. And then I have a notepad that I scribble notes on throughout. And then later on, they're illegible. I don't know why I do it. It takes up a lot of space and I don't need it because it's not helpful. I guess I keep initiative. That's what it does. And then I guess all my dice to the right of that. That's my setup.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm very low tech.
Yeah, okay.
I might have a speaker hidden somewhere behind me and my phone to play music.
Do you have a GM screen?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
What's your current GM screen?
My current one is the Kingdoms and Warfare GM screen, which has these lovely little messages that just say they're already having fun. Don't worry about it. Across it's cute.
That is encouraging. Shawn Merwin, what is your GM setup look like typically?
Similar to Dael's, except I don't use a DM screen. So I have my laptop or a tablet with the adventure content on it. I have my monster stats separate. So if I need to refer to monsters and then refer to text, as one sometimes is wont to do, I can do that. I have 4 sets of plain white dice that no one would ever want to steal in a million years. So that covers me unless it's a really high level adventure where you need to roll 27d6 for some reason. And then I will bring out more dice. I have markers, tokens for inspiration, tokens to track initiative, numbered 1 through 7, 1 through 8. I usually don't use minis. If I'm DMing in public, I will use candy for monsters. Okay. Speaking of snacks at the table, that's the one time where snacks work at the table. Here's a trick for that. If you have a big bad guy that you don't want anyone to mess with, make that like the kale bar. And then for all the minions, you make those the peanut butter cup, Hershey's Kisses, and so on. And then people will be going after the minions, leaving you our big monster, big kale monster No one wants to mess with that.
That's devious, Shawn.
Yeah. That's it's social engineering all the way.
Yeah.
Tough tips, right?
It's all game design. It's all game design.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
And yeah, that's pretty much it. And index cards, the
yes, of course,
tool of champions. Right.
Yes. Yes, learning to incentivize and de-incentivize certain types of play. James Hake, what is your typical GM setup?
I miss playing in person, Ben. I miss having a GM setup. I miss being not behind a microphone and a camera and kind of having dice crowded into my desk wherever I can fit them and sort of 8 windows open. There's something sort of wholesome and archivist-like about having 8 books open at once. There's something gremlin-esque about having 8,000 tabs of D&D Beyond open at once. So maybe that paints something of a picture of the state of chaos in which digital DMing sort of forces me to exist. But I still use physical dice. Even playing online will not get me to abandon the sweet tactile joy of clickety math rocks. There's something that digital dice, even if they're maybe more random, just can't do in the way that physical dice can.
I can't remember whether it was on this podcast or it was somewhere else that I was listening to this, but, just the joy of rolling dice is a game mechanic kind of in and of itself. And that's why, there's a lot of talk of GMs rolling behind the screen for player abilities, or GMs doing all the rolls, which is the way that it's done on Harmon Quest. I don't know if that actually harkens back to an earlier edition where the GM made all the rolls of different types of games, but I feel like it's taking an element of fun away from the players to do that, because just picking up the dice, physically rolling it, especially if it's a big chunk of D6s, is why Fireball's so fun. These are not original thoughts. People will have heard this stuff before around the internet, but I just want to say...
It's a good thought worth saying.
I concur, is what I mean to say. We are going to dive in the news because speaking of things I concur with, there's a lot of it to get through this week, and kind of a lot of little announcements that could be big announcements. I'm not really sure. We'll find out, I suppose, how much we discuss each of these, but I ended up filling up the whole run sheet with a bunch of little things that may indicate bigger things. Speaking of big things, Citadel of the Unseen Sun is a big adventure, so much so that its physical release is coming in a 6-book slipcase set with each episode, I assume, this hasn't been said to me explicitly, but I assume each book being one of the episodes that is being released. James Hake, as the project lead and the design lead on Citadel of the Unseen Sun, how excited are you for the impending physical release of Citadel of the Unseen Sun?
I'm pumped. Ben, you're right. Yes, you're right, of course. 6 episodes, 6 books in the slipcase. I've seen some of the graphic design for it in the office, and it looks... it's a beautiful, beautiful book in slipcase. And it gives the opportunity to go back to the very first fable, the fable in which we were still sort of finding our feet. And figuring out what the hell do we do with this format, and to tighten a couple of the bolts, I think, actually include all of the errata that we've done over the PDFs run in the printed book, and just generally get the size of this adventure really apparent to people. I think in its sort of 6-part release, there is a level of obfuscation of how titanic an adventure this is. But when I was shown the spine of the slipcase, I was like, this is like a 5-inch thing. This is enormous. This is War and Peacean in its girth. Like, this is incredible. Do you not like that? Is that a word I shouldn't have used in this discussion?
Use whatever words you like. Your vocabulary is your own.
I like girth. Girth is a good word.
But I do reserve the right to giggle.
because we're 12. Citadel of the Unseen Sun had a lot of really interesting stuff going for it then, and has a lot of interesting stuff going for it now. Back when it first released, it was a lot of people's first look at creatures in the monster grimoire. Some new critters that showed up in that monster book, which people have now made their debut there. Now, these days, it still remains the largest Grim Hollow adventure we ever have, and to be perfectly honest, are likely ever to produce. And just the amount of play you're going to get out of this, or the amount of individual episodes, sessions that you're going to be able to strip out of this and run, is immense. I think now that the sort of statute of limitations on some of the mid-range spoilers of this adventure have expired a little bit, it's safe to talk about how the first 3 episodes of this fable, of this adventure, are very, they're distinct to the ancient lore of Grim Hollow, but they can very easily be sort of transported out because they're so magical and they're so kind of otherworldly, right? The first episode is this sort of underworld, like you're in a massive grave underneath the ground. The second one is in this realm of dreams that takes you all across Etheros. The third is this absolutely Venetian carnival of undeath. There's this sort of otherworldly quality to all of them. And then the fourth episode, set in the lands of the Astoyan Empire itself, is very easy to sort of pick apart and use in a very specifically Astoyan setting. I know that it's one of the most popular elements of Grim Hollow, one of its most beloved regions, Astoya. And so having all of these little adventure sites, there's 3 towns in that 4th episode, and then there's the big city of Nova Astoya itself in the 5th, that it's practically a mini setting guide already. I have such pride for this adventure, even though there's a lot of finding my own stability while it was being created. I'm
going to be totally honest. I actually haven't read it cover to cover. I've read the first 2 adventures. And
how dare you, Ben Byrne?
Well, again, just speaking of the girth of this adventure, it was far too much for me to be able to sort of get through at the time.
You couldn't handle the girth?
Yeah, I couldn't handle the girth. And we're banned from YouTube suddenly.
Oh no, our ad revenue.
No. The Astoyan parts of the latter part of the fable, I've really enjoyed kind of quickly moseying through. And you're right, it is like a mini campaign guide or world setting guide for Astoya, because there is a lot of lore and different things revealed in there. And if you're someone who didn't subscribe to Fables but have become a fan of Grim Hollow recently, I don't know, maybe you attended a convention where we were selling physical copies of our books recently, and you are pan-Oceanian based. Is that a word? Anyway.
It is now.
It is now. I think I just took the word from infinity rather than using the actual real world word. Anyway, the point being that it is a fantastic adventure for Astoya. I know that I'm going to pick it up. There are plans for my party to travel to Astoya. And I basically just want to be like, all right, great. Now I don't have to invent everything along the way. I can grab the episodes from Fables and start using them to build a goal for my party to aim towards, and you go and explore not just the wilderness. Like, that's what I love about those later 3 episodes, is they go from the kind of wilderness of Astoya and Soma specifically into the bloodied streets of Nova Astoya. So you kind of get a look at both those areas, both those regions of Astoya, and then kind of has this great climactic conflict with the Lich, who is the main villain of the story. Spoilers, maybe. But anyway, it's going to be great. It is going to be crowdfunded through BackerKit. So creating a physical copy of Citadel of the Unseen Sun was never part of the plan initially, but BackerKit offered us an opportunity to crowdfund through their service. So we're going to give that a go and see how it's going. If you're interested in backing, whether you've played when it was a fable, it is no longer a fable, it is its own thing. Whether you've played or not, then you can keep an eye on the Ghostfire Gaming website, our social medias, that sort of thing, for more news about that as it comes out. Next, we announced all this in a little video on the Ghostfire Gaming YouTube channel. I want to just drop a few more hints about the Kickstarter coming Q1 2023, about the books that are coming with that Kickstarter 2023. Shawn Merwin, I know you can't say much. I don't know if you know what what we're making public, but what would you like to say to kind of whet people's appetite for our Q1 Kickstarter next year?
Not having seen the video yet, I will risk it, and I will say a few things.
Okay, great.
The first thing I will say is, the world of Atheros was created by Jordan and Rex Gibson. Back, we're going on about 5 years now. And this was based on their home campaign, and they did a really fine job of putting an inspiring set of rules and an inspiring setting together to really scratch the itch of people looking for a grimdark setting. And so they said, hey, let's kickstart this. They didn't have big celebrity behind them, whether in the real world or in sort of the digital realm of D&D. And yet they did extremely well. And that really goes to show sort of the magic that they captured with this. And so we did our 3 books. We did the campaign guide, the player's guide, and then the monster book, the Monster Grimoire. And we needed to take a step back and assess where we were with this. So we did some other projects. We did Aurora and we did some fables. And now we think it's time to go back. It's time to go back and dig a little bit deeper into this setting, because one of the things about the setting was it wasn't so dense that a DM couldn't pick it up and do their own thing with it. And, some people love that, and some people want more, want a little deeper dive. It's time for that deeper dive. And so we are now getting ready to start exploring smaller segments of the world of Atheros, not in an adventure form, although that will be part of it, but in a way that really gets right down to the essence of what makes these regions not just parts of a cool world, but parts of a cool game. Places where you would want to run a specific kind of campaign and a specific kind of dark campaign, a specific kind of horror campaign. One of the things that Rime of the Frost Maiden from Wizards of the Coast promised was this sort of Arctic horror. And I was all about that. And when I got and read the book, I was like, this is a great book that's missing Arctic horror.
Legit.
Right?
Yeah.
So let's see what we can do.
Sure.
And I won't go much further than that, other than to say that we are pouring our hearts and our souls into giving the best products that we can for our fans of Grim Hollow.
Sure.
Now, I have seen this video, and I would just like to say the thing that Shawn is very tactfully not saying, which is, we're going to Valaka. We're going north.
Yeah, I get the sense if you're a fan of, and this is more inspired by, to be fair, because we want to make something that feels unique, but definitely flavored by like Norse mythology. And, if you're a fan of like God of War, I feel like the more recent one, I feel like you might enjoy the flavor of this. I did want to ask the two of you though, because you both worked on sections of this project, these books, plural, if you will, that are going to be part of this Kickstarter. Did you work much together, and have you worked together before? This is like more directly. This is something I genuinely don't know.
Every project we do together, Shawn, I feel like we work together just a little bit more.
Yeah, for the Monster Grimoire, I worked with James to say, what monsters do you need for the Fable? We'll make sure they get into the book. And here are some monsters that I'm working on right now that you might be able to use. And this next project is a little bit more of a close collaboration. We led separate books, but we communicated and continue to communicate closely to make sure that everything syncs up.
I think the thing that kept us still from, like, I would say working truly like arm in arm, skipping down the yellow brick road, Shawn, is that
the Rainbow Bridge, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. Was that we had our own teams to lead because, multiple books, and we're doing fairly disparate things that kind of reunite in the end. And so the team that Shawn has led was really cool, full of some of my favorite people working in RPGs right now. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. And then my team had another cool people, including some of the other favorite people I have working in RPGs right now. So it all turned out great.
Yeah, I'm really excited. After we had a meeting a couple of weeks back where I had heard that it was Valakar, I was super keen to hear what you'd been working on. And after the two of you basically pitched more or less to the rest of the company, or no, it wasn't really a pitch. It was more like an explanation of what you've been working on. I came out of that meeting so excited. Like it's kind of weirdly frustrating to me, and maybe this is going to sound gauche to describe this, but like working for the company, it sounds very like salesman-y when I'm like, I'm so excited. This is going to be great. Like, I'm a huge fan of this. No, I am a huge fan of this. Like, I am so excited to see what this looks like when I get into the weeds of it. And what the both of you described really sounds like it's up my alley. Rampant Wombat is asking in the chat if we can go into more detail about like what mechanics and different things are going to be used to really create that horror campaign. And I'm going to say for the moment, I don't think we can go into any further detail about that. You'll just have to keep an eye again on the Ghostfire Gaming socials to keep up with that. And of course, we'll talk about it here more on the Lorecast as we get closer. Q1 2023 is when this Kickstarter is going to launch. So keep an eye out and be excited. And speaking of things that are launching, the one other Ghostfire bit of news that we launched through that video was that our just little Grim Hollow class that hunts monsters, the Monster Hunter, has now been released as a full PDF playtest document. Originally, it was released on the blog sort of across 5 different articles, and those articles weren't written all at once and then released. It was smash one out, put it up on the blog, smash another one out a couple of weeks later when I had time, put it up on the blog. I wasn't working on this on my own. We did have a great writer, Skawabi, working with me on working on this Monster Hunter. And so the community were really influential in terms of, like, very specific example was the community pondering whether the Monster Hunter would get multi-attack at 5th level and whether that would be its 5th level ability. And they were like, I hope it gets something more interesting than that. And I was like, all right, I've got to give it something more interesting than just multi-attack.
Spice.
Yeah, exactly.
A little bit of extra flavor
in there, yeah. So I gave it multi-attack. But I also gave it Grave Strike, so it's got a few extra abilities. So all of this is in a video that is on the Ghostfire Gaming YouTube channel. If you want to check out the Monster Hunter, it is a free class. You can grab hold of it, you can play test it, use it in your game as much as you want. And then if you want to give a little bit of feedback on the Monster Hunter, there is a Google form there as well to provide feedback on it if you like it. If you don't like it, I don't know, it might be cool.
I will be less bashful than Ben in advocating for his class. Give some feedback. Goodness sake, that helps the class. It makes the class better. If you like the class, give some feedback. If you didn't like the class, give some feedback. Whatever you do, that sort of playtesting feedback will most likely give the designers working on it a real edge in to hone.
Right. And there's nothing else going on that needs playtesting right now. So that's fine.
Yeah, that's fair.
This is the most important playtest you could possibly contribute to right now. Exactly. That's all we're saying.
I'm also going to say, yeah, even if you're a GM, like I'd love feedback from GMs that are running for Monster Hunters as well, or players that are playing in a party with a Monster Hunter, even if they're not playing the Monster Hunter themselves. I'd be curious to get different perspectives on how this non-magical monster hunting class functions.
I was just going to say, because that's the only balance that really matters, is how fun is it to play, but also how fun is it to play with if you're
not. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And that's actually close to my point, which is that feedback is not only about the class, but it's about how you like to play. And that tells us not just about this class, but about other products that we're putting out. What sorts of power levels do you like your characters to have as opposed to the monsters that we're putting out, so we can figure out the best way to serve the Grim Hollow public.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with, new classes finding their niche. The Monster Hunter has been compared a fair bit with the Ranger, which was not the intention going in there. It was not to build a new Ranger or a better Ranger necessarily. It was to build a better Monster Hunter, which I felt the Ranger doesn't quite fill the core fantasy, stealing a term from Super Geek Mike, doesn't quite fulfill that for me. So I was like, I want something that feels like it's an expert specifically in hunting monsters, but you also don't want it to eat the lunch of fighters, rogues, rangers specifically either. So just making sure that it can function as part of a party of different builds.
Well, I think that what that is indicative of is that people are hungry for something that is, that fantasy of a specialist who goes out there and is this is my thing that I am very specifically trained and good at. And whether you do it the way that I did it, which is a mess, which is to go in and just gut the Ranger and rearrange everything, rearranger everything.
Right. There you go.
Or whether it is to make a new class, because lots of people are happy with the fantasy of the Ranger as it currently stands, right? And that's something I was free to ignore in my document because I'm publishing for just me and my table, and what I say at my table goes. But if you're publishing for a broader audience, lots of people are happy with the fantasy of the Ranger. So you're just giving them a separate option that for the people who are hungry for that conception of a Ranger, this is a thing that they can have instead without killing the existing Ranger fantasy.
This is an element of game design that I think is not talked about often enough when it comes to D&D, because D&D is a big sprawling game that has many different interlocking parts. That's obvious. That's been well talked about. But both the classes and the actual adventure design are a part of the design of D&D. And generally in class design, the conventional wisdom is to make a class that is as broadly applicable as possible for two reasons. One is sort of a make the game accessible reason. You want something that appeals to a lot of players and their sort of imaginations. But also you want a character that is broadly applicable in a wide variety of game scenarios. And what we've talked about here is kind of the opposite of that. Not totally. It's not like the Monster Hunter is the nichest of the niche, but it is a specialist. Just like you said, Dael, it's a specialist that deals with a pretty specific scenario. It just so happens it's the most common scenario in many D&D games, killing monsters. But but it's still just one corner of the game in its entirety. And because you now occupy a fairly specific niche within your gameplay, it's incumbent upon the GM, who has the other half of the game to handle, the actual encounter design, the level design, the story design of the game. Now that they know that you're playing that, it falls to them a little bit to support you in the class fantasy that you want to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was the thing that the Ranger had, was if the GM wasn't actively trying to support what the Ranger needed, the number of times that I've had Ranger players ask me when they've gone into a cave, does this count as like Rocky Mountains now, or are we still in a forest? I'm not sure. striking that balance was something that was a challenge with the Monster Hunter, between making them a specialist in specific types of monsters, but not making their abilities useless unless those specific scenarios cropped up. So that's something that I'd like to get feedback on as well, is how broadly applicable. Because I'm someone who, like, with the classes, you're right, they are very broad, and a lot of the time when you're designing a new class or a new subclass, you want to make sure you're not just redesigning something that already exists with different words, you know? Like, you want to make sure you can't build a Monster Hunter, or you can't build a whatever by using another class and just kind of, you know, engineering through its subclasses and taking a feat, you know? Like creating, for example, like the witch class, as in like the cauldron stirring, broom riding witch class. You know, could you accomplish that core fantasy by just taking specific packs with a warlock or with a wizard, and then just calling yourself in-game a witch? And so, but that being said, I don't like a tool, one tool for every occasion. I like the idea that the party is filled with specialists that have specific tools that work in specific situations, so that light can be shone on them, but also so that they can face challenges that they can't just kind of, you know, instantly get their way out of because they just, you know, re-describe something in their toolkit to make it work. And
right.
So,
if you encounter a locked door or a trap or something,
exactly.
You want either to spotlight the rogue, or if the party doesn't have a rogue, suddenly they have to come up with some new way to get around it. You know?
Spotlight the barbarian. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the first two solutions for doors. Pick the lock, break it down.
Yeah.
Like, that's all you need. Well, speaking of hunting monsters, you know what I really like to hunt for is unique Lego sets. I just told a lie. I haven't touched Lego in a very long time. I'm sorry. Oh, actually, that's not true. I have this little Lego Death Star. Star Destroyer.
I went to the Lego store in Melbourne, Australia to bring in a Lego set from this very same Lego Ideas program that we're about to talk about here.
Wow.
That is a fantasy medieval blacksmith. It's sort of like a little office thing, a little present for everyone to do when we're on lunch, just sort of hang out. Me and like one other person have touched that Lego set. It's been there in the middle of the office the whole time.
I mean, I've
and
definitely...
Ben's off in this little glass room somewhere else.
I definitely touched it and like looked at it and went like, oh, this is cool. But you're right. I have had no time to commit to actually placing a brick down. Is that the Lego lingo? Gonna place a brick down.
Gonna place a brick.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah. Am I the only one here who watches Lego Masters?
Yeah.
Just me. Cool. I think Lego is fun. I think a D&D Lego set is a great idea. The tricky thing is going to be, I mean, they're taking submissions, right? For ideas of what the D&D stuff should be.
Yes.
And I can't help but think it's going to have to be, you know, beholders, mind flayers, displacer beasts, because otherwise you're going to end up with maybe it's a good idea, actually. A really good D&D Lego set would just be like a castle and a dragon and some Lego people that, you know, look like a ranger, a rogue, a wizard, you know. And Lego already has that stuff, and D&D doesn't have to design. No one has to design anything new in that scenario. Maybe it's the best idea to just go, yeah, this one's D&D. Lego benefits from the D&D logo. They don't have to make anything new. That's a great idea. I should work for Lego.
I wonder if just like no one at Lego really knows D&D, you know, like...
they're Lego nerds. They know D&D.
Lego does get used as miniatures a lot, I hear.
Does D&D even exist in Sweden? Is that even a thing? I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. They don't only play Vesson or whatever. Yeah.
One of the things about it is they also want you to design things that are useful at the table, not just as decorations, but as things you use. So I'm thinking of traps, right? I'm thinking of mechanical, cool, revolving door traps, pit traps, all of those things. The gentleman who I play with have a competition going to build the best dice tower out of Legos. And they are bringing huge monstrosities to the table, to the best way to get their dice down. D4s often get stuck. Just if you're going to design one of those, keep that in mind. D4s are problematic in many ways. But you talk about Legos and D&D. Right after this was announced, Monty Cook got on Twitter and told a story which is both disquieting and heartening at the same time. When he worked at TSR, he used Legos in his home games, and he wanted to go to a convention and have a whole seminar on using Legos in your D&D game. And, do a workshop and have people build things. And so he contacted Lego, and he got the runaround from them. And finally he got a hold of someone who could give him a definitive answer. And the answer was Lego will never work with D&D. Ever. Because this was the Satanic Panic era, and they didn't want that negative connotation. So think about that answer that he got 25 years ago of never work with them, to the point we're at now where I'm sure that there was, a lot of positive vibes going back and forth between Lego and D&D on this.
Yeah.
Our good Christian bricks will never touch the foul, besmirched face.
Which is so funny, because the Satanic Panic being all around, the sort of spell casting and demons and things. Haven't all those things appeared in Lego?
Probably.
I'm just really excited at the idea of traps now, though, because I'm suddenly flashing back to my childhood. And you used to be able to get, I'm sure they still do it, but you used to be able to get, these castle sets, and there would be little trapdoors. You'd pull out a thing and it would drop. It would swing out a door and the Lego figures would fall down into a dungeon. But there was a secret revolving door in that dungeon that they could get out. Oh, you're right. And now I'm really excited about it.
The Rube Goldbergian Legos are always the best ones. Yes.
Sorry, I'm trying. Somebody asked in the chat.
He's so distracted.
Thank you.
I can't believe that he's doing this. I would never be paying attention to chat while in the midst of doing the Lorecast. I've never done that in my life.
I'm trying to share a link to the Monster Hunter chat PDF. Yeah, that is fascinating to me that Lego would have said that back in the day. I'm trying to pick up the threads of this conversation. I'm so sorry, Shawn. I was absolutely listening. Go on. What were you saying?
Pick up wherever the hell you want to pick up, Ben. Pick up wherever the hell you like.
So what is interesting about this to me, as you said, Shawn, Lego will never work with D&D. Lego and Hasbro, obviously kind of rival toy companies. I'm sure the contract for this was a fairly straightforward licensing contract. But as the next little slew of news that we're about to go through will reveal, I think we are starting to see the future of Dungeons & Dragons a little bit outside of the game, in terms of turning it into a money-making enterprise by licensing out the name. And it is true. It's kind of what is Dungeons and Dragons in a Lego set, and specifically Dungeons and Dragons? What is not fantasy in a Lego set?
We're going to see a Beholder Lego set, and you know what? It's going to be cool. I'm not even that big a fan of Beholders, but that's going to be cool.
Would you build something like a grid, like that could be used in game?
I guess.
I mean,
they have, I don't know whether they still do these, but they had those big, just fields of grass that you could get with Lego to start, and you'd build on top of them. It'd be a neat idea to get one of those that has the grid built on it.
Oh,
That'd be handy. That'd be neat.
Yeah.
That'd be a good idea. What I do think is interesting is that Lego works with the biggest brands in the world.
Sure.
The biggest brands in the world. Disney, Star Wars, they are working with the absolute monoliths of sort of pop culture figures. Figures feels wrong because I'm talking about, enterprises, sort of series, whatever. But that is a huge sign for D&D. Because for us within nerd spaces, sure, Dungeons and Dragons is a big name, very recognizable. But on a broader global scale, you sort of question sometimes whether it competes with something like Star Wars. But the idea that Lego is here and ready and willing to team up is a very good sign for
strong indicator
for the health of the D&D brand globally.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of licensing deals, just kind of tying it into this conversation, it was announced that there are 2 novels that are going to be prequels to the D&D movie Honor Among Thieves. One is called Druid's Call, written by E.K. Johnston, and the second one is called The Road to Neverwinter, which will be written by, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Jaylee Johnson. Druid's Call is about Doric, which is Sophia Lillis's tiefling, controversially owl shape.
Controversially tiefling, controversially owlbear wild shaping.
Owlbear, yeah, what did I say? Owl shape.
Owl shape, yeah.
Yeah, great.
I think it's interesting that they definitely had this in the works beforehand.
Yes,
but optically, 100%. I think it's really funny that this is the character that had the most controversy, and that's the character we're getting a book for.
Well, I wonder if they're going to explain why she can turn into monstrosities.
I hope they don't.
Me too. Well, I hope they do, but it was clearly like a rushed extra chapter that was kind of thrown in there.
Just one line at the very end of the book. Also, just so you know, the reason she could turn into an owlbear. Yeah.
I wonder if they'll give a character sheet for her in the back of the book.
That would be great. That's a good idea.
I don't think they will, but it is a fantastic idea.
Yeah. Because
that was like, I was literally
Call
just
me wizards.
Imagine if they did, I don't think they'll do it with this, but imagine if they did a D&D book that was not like a fantasy in-world book, but it was a book about people literally playing D&D. I think it would read terribly, but I think it would be fascinating. Like, you know how Interview with the Vampire is technically, that whole novel is technically just dialogue because it's just the interview. But Louis goes into so much detail that at some point you kind of forget that it's an interview, and he paints such a picture that it more or less just becomes an in-world novel, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Could they get away with that? And again, I don't think this is what they're doing, but could they get away with that in a D&D novel where it's like, Brad rolled a 16, which means that Jeremiah, the rogue, successfully picked the lock with his +6 sleight of hand check, and thus the party managed to pile through the door, as was described by Haley, the game master. Would that be a fun book to read?
I don't know. You're not selling me.
All right. I feel like I need to prove this concept could work.
So, I mean, to be fair, they do that in tabletop RPG books frequently. They've got that little bit at the start where they say, okay, if you've never done this before, let's do a little narrative bit to show you how it works. And
that's true.
They're usually fine.
That's true.
So I looked up these authors because I was very curious about who they were. And I was quite surprised. I mean, I wasn't surprised that they're like really well written and they have a lot of experience under their wings. But I was actually quite interested by the properties that they've worked on. Because E.K. Johnston is a pretty dyed-in-the-wool tie-in novelist. She's done a lot. She's done a recent Padme Amidala trilogy for Star Wars. Queen's Peril, Queen's Hope, Queen's Shadow. She's done an Ahsoka book. And she's done a fair amount of her own original fiction as well. But those Padme books, I think, recently got a lot of big press on social media. I saw them kind of flying all over the place. So it makes sense for her to do a movie tie-in book here. Just a good person to have on call. But Jaylee Johnson, she's a D&D novelist. She's been writing D&D books since 3rd edition set in the Forgotten Realms. And this shocked me because the Forgotten Realms novels have not exactly been flying fast and furious lately. There was there was a handful of R.A. Salvatore novels that came out, 5 years ago? But previously, that sort of venerable institution of the Forgotten Realms novel has kind of vanished from the D&D brand slate. And so for them to bring back a classic, like a turn of the millennium Forgotten Realms author to lead the tie-in novels for their movie, I think speaks really well to the Forgotten Realmsiness of what they're planning on doing with this movie.
Yeah. There are also 3 books from a Dutch D&D Twitter feed, a Twitter feed in German. Sorry, not Dutch, German. D&D Twitter feed that looks at news. They had 3 other books from Penguin Random House.
Oh, okay.
A deluxe junior novelization retelling the story of Honor Among Thieves for children with lots of pictures. There was The Quest Begins, a storybook based on the movie. And then for kids age 5 to 8, a getting into reading book for beginning readers that is using the D&D movie as its subject, including stickers for ages 3 to 7. Of course, we're all going to be buying this because stickers, D&D stickers, let's do this. Now, I went to the website that this article linked to, and it had been taken down. So I don't know if Penguin Random House sort of tipped their hat too soon, but the Twitter feed itself had that information.
Oh, getting the fresh news here.
Yeah, there we go. Hot out of the oven.
Nice.
Don't touch it. You'll get burned.
I would love to see them also from the Wizards of the Coast side of things. I would love to see them publish an explicitly for kids mini adventure, really simplified D&D rules that tie into the movie, right? Because I think that's the audience that will kind of go for something like that. I think people our age will see the movie and will like it fine. But kids sort of, I don't know, I'm just thinking if I was, I don't know, like 10 to 12 and I saw this movie, I know I haven't seen it yet, but I get the vibes. I would love it. I would love that, and I would be wanting to leap in there. I think it's a really good opportunity for Wizards of the Coast if they wanted to do that and really actually properly work on a for kids streamlined, is the one.
I'm because sure they've tried to do it a handful of times.
Yeah.
And it just never quite gets off the ground.
Yeah. I think this is the opportunity. Take it. Also, by the way, properties. That was the word that I was thinking of when I said figures. My brain's back online. People.
Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah, I mean, I think we're only going to see more and more of this. I think this movie, is a great opportunity for exposure for Dungeons and Dragons. But what I wasn't thinking of initially, and definitely am now, is the merchandising opportunities that this opens up in a massive way. I used to work at EB Games, which is like GameStop equivalent here in Australia. And they also have a sister company called Zing Pop Culture, which is kind of like they have a small board game section, but it's more like, T-shirts and pop vinyls and, that sort of thing, toys, statues, collectibles, posters. I don't need to go through their full catalog, but the point is that you could always tell when a movie was having a really big push behind it, because about 3 months before it came out, we were getting an influx of merchandise for it. Usually the pop vinyls would show up first. I remember very distinctly before The Force Awakens came out and everybody saw BB-8 kind of trundling along the ground. Nobody had seen the movie, but everybody wanted that pop vinyl of the little ball droid. And I remember a dad coming in and getting all disgruntled. He's like, the movie's not even out yet. You already want all this crap. Like, why do I? It was very funny. But I think that there's, huge opportunity here for D&D. It wouldn't surprise me if the tiefling's horns on a headband are like something that they're going to be selling. Yeah. And obviously foam versions of the weapons and Chris Pratt's loot and, all of that sort of stuff.
Not Chris Pratt. It's the other Chris. You're thinking of Mario.
Oh, you're right. Yes. What did I say?
Chris Pine.
Did I say? What did I say?
Pratt.
You said Pratt.
It's the P. The P tripped me up.
Forgotten Realms, here we come, says Chris Pratt.
That's flawless. I closed my eyes. I was watching Guardians of the Galaxy for a moment there, or Parks and Recreation.
Have we seen the Mario trailer? Have we all seen the Mario movie trailer?
I've heard amazing things about it in terms.
I really like it. I really like it, except for Chris Pratt's voice, and this is not an unpopular opinion.
No, I was when it was first announced, I was listening to video game podcasts that were really confused by that casting, especially wondering, like, is he going to do the Mario voice? Like, what's he going to do here?
What he's going to do is like his own voice, I guess.
He's doing his shtick. He's doing his Lego movie. I'm Chris Pratt. I'm Chris Pratt. I'm Henry. Mario. Yeah. Mario time. Boing.
It's flawless. Yeah. It's like he's in the room with me.
Really good impression.
Yeah, good. No, I'm glad. All right. Quickly moving on. well, not quickly. We've still got a bit of time left. The Legend of Vox Machina, world famous Amazon TV show, animated TV show, famous for no other reason, has been renewed for season 3. And there has been a small little bite-sized tidbit shown from the start of season 2, which, if you didn't know, will be airing in January 2023, which is actually pretty close. That's not far away at all. No. Have we watched the tidbit? Have we?
I haven't. I completely missed it in amongst all the chaos of the last sort of week.
Me
for
too.
Me. But
I watched it right before we started taping, and it's not even a trailer. It's not a sort of sizzle reel sort of thing. It's just about a solid minute of footage from the beginning of the season, as the Chroma Conclave swoops in to the skies of Iman. And it looks pretty good. It looks like more Legend of Vox Machina. There hasn't been a huge tonal shift. Everything seems like basically the same sort of stuff we were getting in season 1. So if you liked season 1, you'll like this. If you didn't, you probably won't.
Yeah.
But I should say the Chroma Conclave arc is like one of my favorite D&D arcs of all time. It's just so good. The quests they go on, the places they go, the fights with the dragons. I hope they get Patrick Rothfuss in to voice his character from Campaign 1. I hope they get Chris Perkins in to voice his character from Campaign 1. That probably won't happen, but that would be fun.
Is that where he showed up?
Yeah.
I've seen those clips, but I've never had it contextualized.
Well, he was Spurt the Kobold in Campaign 2.
Oh, okay, that's what I'm thinking of. Right.
He was also Shale, a Goliath, when they were hunting down the Black Dragon Umbrasyl.
Goliath woman.
Right.
Very cool.
Yeah,
very cool character. I loved Chris Perkins' character in Campaign 1. He was a great guest. Mm-hmm. I think people forget about him when they talk about Critical Role casts. We forgot about him. We were talking about favorite Critical Role casts.
It's true, and I am ashamed.
But it looks fun.
Yeah.
Season 1 of Legend of Vox Machina basically started rough for me and got better with like literally every episode. So if we start at the same level of quality where we ended season 1, it will be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. I enjoyed the little clip. I'm not sure, and I don't know whether this was an animation studio. Yeah, there you go. Arm cross. I don't know whether this was an animation studio thing or this was a Matt Mercer kind of like, directing the animation studio specifically kind of thing. The animation looks incredible. The 3D animation that they've done to create like this, depth perception of the dragons flying around is great. You get this great silhouette of one of the dragons. I'm not sure which one it is. I can't actually feel like its color's a little motley along the wings. So I think maybe it was the green one, but it's got like this real kite, kind of almost like Batman symbol silhouette to it. It looks very cool gliding around. But I'm not sure I'm a fan of their like Kamehameha style breath weapons. Because it's like, open mouth, energy ball in the mouth, and then energy beam, and then like the elemental effect happens on impact.
Okay, but what you just described sounds dope though, so...
Yeah, I'm not going to say it's not. I just don't know if it's like...
What's your preferred sort of approach to breath weapon, right? Are you a flight of dragons? There's gas in the belly and there's a little like lighter spark gland.
Gotcha.
Are you
this Rain of Fire as well kind of says that. It's like, they're like, but how do they breathe fire? And it's like, well, centipedes can spit acid. And it's like, oh, well, answered then. Now we know. Just quickly, welcome Luna's chat. I assume it's Luna's dropping in. Yay, Lunar Raid. Thank you for letting us know. Funky. Welcome across. We're just talking about dragon design in the Legend of Vox Machina. So perfect audience for it, really, in terms of Critical Role fans. I think there's a centipede that can spit acid. Don't we have fire spitters here in Australia? They're referred to as?
Yeah, the little... Spitfires.
Spitfires. Fire spitters, Spitfires. Yeah.
Always scared of them.
I don't know. It just looks a little too, especially with the animation style for Legends of Vox Machina, is very clean as opposed to like...
clean, that's true.
As opposed to like Castlevania, which lets itself get really sketchy sometimes. Like literally it looks like sketches rather than like fully hand-drawn. Even, it's more of an anime-ish style. The Legends of Vox Machina looks very clean, and so the dragon breath to me looks very kind of almost sci-fi rather than fantasy, because it looks like a big like Gatling cannon, or plasma cannon kind of charging up and then dispersing. That's all. That's my only complaint. Otherwise, I'm sure we'll see plenty more Scanlan's balls.
Okay, I will make a mild complaint here, and it's my frustrations with Gilmore, because I love Gilmore in Campaign 1. I love him to death. And yet every instance of Gilmore in the show is just sort of like camp gay joke after camp gay joke. And I'm like, this feels like the weakest possible version of Gilmore. And it like right in that trailer, he's like, yeah, dragons. I feel like I'm overdressed. I'm like, no, come on. Oh, well. If that's my only complaint, then I'm sure it'll be fine. But
I wonder if that's because I'm not super familiar with Gilmore as a character. I never really watched the episodes of Critical Role that he was in. But is that because he's got, Critical Role episodes are 4 hours and scenes with a character tend to go for a very long time. It's like we've got to communicate his character in really only a few lines,
Yeah, maybe. But it's also hard because in the middle of the Chroma Conclave in particular, you get to find out that Gilmore's not just like a funny, lovable side character. He's also a badass. Mm-hmm. Like Chroma Conclave is where you go, oh, okay, there's something deeper here that we don't really know about.
Right.
Yeah. Like, because throughout the campaign, Gilmore kind of does maintain this level of sort of disaffected jest throughout it all. He is kind of quippy, but Chroma Conclave, it's one of the reasons why I love this arc so much is in his interactions with Vax, especially after some shit happens to Vax. Oh, damn it, we're demonetized.
It wasn't me.
It was me this time. Especially after, stuff goes down with Vax. There's a lot of real emotional tenderness that comes out of Gilmore's character. And then he's a goddamn badass. So maybe I'm reading too much into a 1 minute clip, a 3-second soundbite from a 1 minute clip. I hope, because like Gilmore's Matt's favorite character. He loves Gilmore, so I'm sure that he will be that Matt will be his biggest advocate. So we'll see.
Gotcha. To answer your earlier question, I've thought about it a little bit. To answer your earlier question about how I would approach breath weapons, I think, because we're getting some people talking about it in the chat as well, there's a couple of fire gland proponents. Yeah. I don't mind that. I think that's maybe where I would land if you're thinking of dragons as more bestial. But I like to think of dragons as almost elemental, that Game of Thrones line, like flesh or fire made flesh.
Okay.
And so the idea is that it's like maybe there's a gland, maybe there's some scientific answer to it, but really like a fire dragon is fire, I guess in that case, it just makes it magical,
right.
But it just, it exhales its essence, a white dragon freezes things because it is made of ice and snow in a way.
You don't need that explanation necessarily. It's a fire breath. It's like we breathe out air. Sometimes they breathe out fire. That's just what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't mind the Skyrim, they're like talking to each other. There was a funny clip about like two dragons having a battle in the sky. I think this was a webcomic I saw. And there was a father speaking to his son going, look, as the dragons battle, how beautiful it is up there as they dip and dive and attack each other with their breath weapons. And then it cuts to the dragons saying like, you left the oven on. And I swear I did not, as their breath weapons impact upon each other. Wizards of the Coast have assigned, I think this was Wizards, or maybe this came from Hasbro, I'm not quite sure. No, I think it was Wizards, assigned a new senior VP, vice president for Wizards of the Coast, Dan Rawson, formerly of Microsoft and Amazon, I assume at separate times. His experience indicates that Wizards of the Coast are continuing to push digital. And just a quick quote, Cynthia Williams, the Wizards of the Coast president, says, quote, with the acquisition of D&D Beyond earlier this year, the digital capabilities and opportunities for D&D are accelerating faster than ever. She said Dungeons and Dragons, not D&D in her actual quote. End quote. It was weird. She put like a little disclaimer at the end of her own quote.
Weird thing to say, Cynthia. What's that about?
Shawn Merwin, is this something that you're I don't want to say pleased by. What's your take on this news? What do you think
What's
this
your
indicates?
read?
Yeah, what's your hot take?
Well, I mean, you can't argue with the fact that this gentleman seems to be very steeped in digital offerings.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show that since this was announced and several other things were announced to shareholders of Hasbro, they want these shareholders to know we are looking at digital. We are looking at making more money. We are looking at expanding the way we deliver this goodness to everyone. And not only that, Hasbro itself is looking to use this same paradigm to change the way we do business. They talked about in 2022 cutting costs through getting rid of labor. And what that says to me is that's Hasbro, not Wizards of the Coast. So the toy companies and the physical board games and the things like that they're making, they're probably cutting costs by de-emphasizing that. They talked about getting rid of or removing themselves from programs that are not profitable. That tells me that they are thinking digitally, not just for D&D, but across the board. In 2018, Adam Bradford, who was in charge of D&D Beyond then, said that they had 3.7 million users at that point. So that was a little less than 4 years ago. This announcement said they now have 12 million registered users. So 3 times as many, including 2 million more since D&D Beyond was acquired. Now, when you bring on somebody in a digital capacity, what they're going to say is, okay, we have 12 million users. That's great. We have 12 million email addresses. We have 12 million inboxes that we can hit. We have 12 million eyes on our stuff. What kind of money are we making off of them? Are all of those people paying for a subscription? Probably 10%, I would guess, of those people that are registered users are actually paying money for things. I bet a lot of them are just using the free tools or getting the free tools from someone who subscribes at a higher level and then shares with them. So the question then becomes, how do we monetize that? So all of that combines with everything we've been talking about books, about new readers coming in. I think we can start to imagine a world where D&D Beyond goes beyond what it is right now and starts to try to engage different kinds of users in different ways.
I think
yeah. No, go ahead.
Oh, well, I'm just thinking about what's been going on with Netflix lately and the sort of fractiousness of streaming. We were talking about this right at the very beginning of all this. Because when Netflix first rocked onto the scene and had sort of a dominant hold on streaming as a medium, video piracy went way down. And now that the system has become kind of more fractious, you have to pay more money into the system to get all the stuff you want. Video piracy is right back up again. And I would be very curious to see how Hasbro navigates the fraught waters of keeping a D&D audience happy enough with what they're paying to keep them from going straight back to mass piracy, while also satisfying the sort of Hasbro shareholder angle of how can we monetize every little bit and bob of this. I think the thing that would instantly kill D&D Beyond's sort of dam against mass piracy again is taking away the ability to share your content with your players as a DM. It sure is an easy way to potentially get more people to buy stuff because they have to, but it just seems like the least good faith move possible in their position.
I think the difference, like I think of a website like The Trove. I think the difference with The Trove, and there was another one before it that I can't remember.
For people who don't know, The Trove is
a piracy website for tabletop RPG, predominantly tabletop RPG content. One of the problems with them, why they were so disliked, is because they were putting up everything. It wasn't just like Wizards of the Coast and, Chaosium and I can't think of the company that does Vampire Masquerade, but it wasn't just the big tabletop RPG stuff they were putting up. It was like small creators that have a Patreon who, make a couple of, $100, $200 a month on their content was going up there. It was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Like DM's Guild stuff, man. Like not even big DM's Guild stuff, like little, like bronze metal, copper metal DM's Guild stuff. It was
it was pretty gross. But I think the thing that would make that not popular, let's assume that something like that, easy access existed or some form of piracy existed, which it does for the Wizards book specifically. I think the functionality of D&D Beyond, the convenience of D&D Beyond, the fact that you can plug all your stats in and you don't have to scroll up and down a PDF to be able to access what your character can do or what an adventure is, I think is going to be a strong disincentivizer, I'll say, rather than deterrent from piracy, because as soon as you try to make a website that's more complicated and a D&D Beyond that breaches any sort of licensing agreement, the hammer's going to come down pretty hard on that, I would think, unless it's well hidden, sort of invite only.
Well, that's what it comes down to, right? Is convenience. At a certain point, convenience is worth the money. And as soon as you do something like take away the ability to share your owned campaign stuff, right, your adventure books, your source books that you've paid for, if you can't share them with your players, that is, I think, I agree with James. It's a loss of convenience that would skyrocket piracy. I think that's the game that they're playing, is how do we keep it convenient enough that it is still worth paying whatever money that they're paying.
I'm curious, just a quick final question for Shawn. In terms of like them talking about de-investing in things that isn't profitable to them, I'm just curious what you think specifically that might be, because we talked about merchandise a little bit earlier. Do you think that they may divest from things like, physical miniatures through WizKids, or do you think that they might de-invest from like encouraging physical play through peripherals that they might support through licensing agreements and things like that?
Well, I think making things from plastic and shipping them across the world is just way too expensive. And so if you can make as much money licensing that, allowing someone else to do that on your behalf and just taking the money from the license, it makes more sense to do that when you have the digital tools or are able to make the digital tools to go with the movie that you're making and the TV series that's coming out, and putting a choose your own adventure site up on D&D Beyond that children can play by themselves and read about. I'm playing this rogue and I'm doing the same thing they did in the movie, but by myself, and I'm learning to read and I'm clicking buttons and moving through. It all comes together and makes sense as long as the perspective isn't lost in the rush to make money.
Yeah, gotcha. Well,
this isn't important, but just checking in on the end that ever since you said it in the scrapped take, I can't stop thinking about calling D&D Beyond Dungeons and Dragons Beyond.
It's like when your mom uses your full name.
Yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons Beyond. Get down
Beyond.
For dinner.
That's what I'll say if they decide to take away the ability to share your own source material. Yeah.
It is much less snappy. Well, speaking of things that aren't snappy, this episode has gone over time, so it's a little bit has a little bit of a wider girth, you might say, than previous episodes of the Eldritch Lorecast. So we are going to end it there. Apologies we didn't get around to any emails. I did see some good questions in the chat. I apologize we didn't get to. Please feel free to email those to podcast@ghostfiregaming.com. I do try to grab as many of them as possible for episodes where there isn't as much news to kind of pack into it. Or you can ask questions on our YouTube channel, Ghostfire Podcasts, or you can just search the Eldritch Lorecast in the YouTube search bar. That brings us up. Leave likes, reviews, all that sort of thing. Pin a tavern notice to a tavern board, a bounty notice to a tavern board. This isn't smooth at all, but do that. Spread the word, basically. Word of mouth. That's what I'm asking kindly for. Otherwise, we'll be back next week. Thank you, Luna, again for rating us. And we will be back. I've been Ben Byrne here with Shawn Merwin, James Haig, Dael Kingsmill, and we will see you all next week.
Bye-bye.
Somebody said, bye, Gerard Butler Man and his friends. That did make me laugh.
Dungeons and Dragons Beyond.